Titus was the son of the legendary Blitzball star Zack, and by the age of 18, Titus himself became not only the captain of his home city of Blitzball team, the Zanarkand Apes, but became a Blitzball superstar himself with his skills in the sport only being rivaled by his father. During a championship Blitzball match, his hometown of Zanarkand was attacked by the creature named Sin. However, Titus managed to survive the ordeal. And it was at this time that Titus ran into his childhood protector Orin, and the two would fight their way through the city in an attempt to escape. However, Orin himself had other plans, and using a portal within Sin's body, was transported 1,000 years into the future to the land of Spirit. After a small little encounter with a small crew of Albed and surviving a second attack by Sin, Titus washed up on the island of Besaid, and it was here that Titus would meet the captain of the Blitzball team, the Besaid Aurochs Waka, the powerful black mage Lulu, and the Ronsa warrior Kamari, and the young summoner Yuna. Titus agreed to travel with Yuna and her guardian to the city of Luca, and it was here that Titus would meet up once again with Orin. Orin informed Titus that his father Jack had become Sin, and the reason Orin brought him to Spirit was to keep his promise to Jack to have Titus help defeat him. It was also at this time that Titus and Orin were officially elevated to the status of guardian for Yuna. Titus would travel with Yuna and her guardians all across Spirit. However, once the party reached the peak of Mount Gagazet, Titus passed out and was told by the faith of the Aeon, Bahamut, that he himself was the dream of the faith, and once Sin and his creator Yevon were defeated, he would disappear. Knowing this, Titus chose not to inform anyone of this truth and continued on with Yuna's pilgrimage. Titus and Yuna and the rest of her guardians managed to defeat Yevon after a long, hard-fought battle. But at the final moment of total victory, Titus began to disappear. After saying his final goodbyes to Yuna and her fellow guardians, Titus jumped off the Albed airship and disappeared completely. However, 2 years later, Titus would be brought somehow, thanks to the powers of the faith, and was reunited with his friends. Zack Fair was born in the town of Gungaga, and his childhood dream was to join Shinra's soldier ranks and become a first-class soldier. At the age of 13, Zack left Gungaga without telling his parents and joined the Shinra military forces. After many years with Shinra, Zack reached soldier second class under the tutelage of soldier first class Angiel. Angiel's words of wisdom and strong sense of honor had a profound effect on Zack, who wanted to emulate his mentor. During his time as a member of Soldier, Zack would make many friends, which included the legendary soldier Sephiroth. After a successful mission to the city of Wutai, Zack was informed by Sephiroth that his mentor Angiel had abandoned Shinra and joined the forces with the rogue soldier agent Genesis. However, Zack refused to believe his mentor would desert Shinra. After some time, Zack was finally promoted to the status of Soldier First Class. However, Zack seemed very unsatisfied despite the fact that he had achieved his childhood dream. Soon after this, the city of Midgard was attacked by Genesis forces, and Zack was confronted by his old mentor. Refusing to fight him, Angiel knocked Zack off a platform, causing him to fall into the slums of Midgard. And it was at this time that Zack would crash through the roof of Sector 5's church and meet the young flower girl Aerith. The two would form a strong friendship, and over the next 2 years would stay in contact over cell phone conversations while Zack was off on missions for Shinra. On a mission to a mountain town of Modehem, Zack would meet and befriend the young infantryman Cloud Strife, and over time the two would become best friends. However, while on the same mission, Zack would be forced to face his mentor Angiel in battle, and after a long, hard-fought battle, Zack emerged victorious with his final words to Angiel, passing on his Buster Sword to Zack. While on a mission to the mountain town of Nibelheim, he would witness his fellow soldier agent Sephiroth suffer a psychotic breakdown after discovering the truth of his origins. Zack was forced to battle Sephiroth. However, in a short battle, Zack was defeated, and it was at this time that his best friend Cloud Strife would pick up Zack's Buster Sword and would attempt to engage Sephiroth, but would be impaled by Sephiroth's Masamune sword twice, but somehow was able to overpower Sephiroth, forcing Sephiroth to jump deep into the Mako Reactor's core. Both Zack and Cloud were retrieved by Dr. Hojo and were used for 4 years for experiments. After escaping Dr. Hojo's lab, Zack and Cloud made their way to the outskirts of Midgard, where they were intercepted by a large Shinra army force. Zack hid Cloud's body outside of sight and left off to engage the army. Although he fought bravely, Zack was overwhelmed by Shinra's forces and was gunned down. In his last moments, Zack passed on his Buster Sword to Cloud and told him that he was his living legacy. Even in death, just like his friend Aerith, Zack would continue to aid Cloud over the course of his life, and during Cloud's final battle with Sephiroth would give him the motivation he needed to defeat Sephiroth once and for all. What's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and I'm here to present my 5th versus series matchup. And today I'll be pitting the captain of the Zanarkand 8's Titus against the first class soldier Zack Fair. Now before I begin, I would just like to give out a statement going over Titus's overall combat capabilities. A viewer of mine stated in my last versus series that he did not agree that I did not allow units access to dark magical abilities due to the fact that in Final Fantasy X you can actually teach unit dark magical abilities. I'm stating this right now, that for future videos from my Versus series, if I ever use a Final Fantasy X character, their capabilities will be limited to their section of the sphere grid. These characters need to have limits, because if I don't add these limits, then virtually any character can do anything, and that simply would not be a fair matchup. With that out of the way, let us get started as I begin to compare Titus and Zack Fair with their physical capabilities. Titus is an 18-year-old human male standing 5'9", and due to his physical build as a star Blitzball player, is in great shape with a high skill performance of being athletic. He is capable of jumping great heights, and his overall performance status states that he is best used for speed. However, it has been shown that although he is in great shape, he may not have much upper body strength. This was shown that when Titus and Auron were escaping Zanarkand during Sin's first attack, after Auron had handed him over a sword given to him by Jecht, Titus had difficulty handling the weight of the sword. But his overall status qualities also clearly state that he is not physically built to take much damage. So in a nutshell, Titus has all the physical qualities of an Olympic track runner with a touch of swimming thrown into the mix. By the end of his life, Zack was a 23-year-old human male standing 5'7", and due to his years of training with Shinra, Zack was in prime shape for combat. Due to his involvement in being used as Dr. Hojo's experiment, Zack was injected with Genova cells, which enhanced all of his physical capabilities. It's been shown that Zack could jump great heights and long distances along with having great strength. His durability was insanely high, and during his final battle against the Shinra army forces, after being riddled with bullets, he was still able to keep a keen sense of combat stability. But despite being badly injured, and it is my personal theory that even after being shot in the head numerous times, he was still alive, even for a few moments. It's pretty clear who wins this round. There's no question that Titus is in great shape and has a high speed and stamina quality to him, but the problem is that he is just not built for individual combat. He had proven himself to be a very capable guardian for Yuna over the course of her pilgrimage, but a majority of all his engagements involved him fighting alongside his fellow guardians, which means that Titus was not given much time to develop his skills on an individual base, and was better working as part of a team. His time in combat was also very limited, as he had spent, I want to say less than 2 weeks fighting in a series of combat scenarios, and I really don't believe his skills would have improved much in that time frame. While Zack has spent a minimum of 5 to 6 years training his body to perform at its peak in combat, and with his body being injected with Genova cells, it only enhanced his already high developed physical capabilities. To sum it up, Titus has the physical build of a sports athlete, while Zack has the physical build of a warrior, and for these reasons I'm giving the physical edge to Zack. Although Titus lacked a high quality of swordsmanship, all of his magical abilities were based on increasing his overall combat performance and taking advantage of Titus's use of speed attacks. His magical abilities range from being able to speed up his own body's movements or slowing down his opponent's body's movements, and he had the ability to increase his own morale in combat and was given a series of special attacks and techniques which took advantages of Titus's speed. However, his most devastating moves were his overdrive attacks. If Titus could build up enough energy within himself, he could unleash one of these devastating moves, which all range from being able to unleash a power array of energy blasts, to being able to strike his opponent with a series of powerful blows faster than his opponent could react. Zack's use of actual magical abilities were very limited, and based off the standards of basic soldier classes for the time, they were really nothing out of the ordinary. He had access to basic magical strikes which ranged from shooting off basic fire blasts to summoning bolts of lightning. However, Zack's most powerful abilities were the use of his limit breakers, which he had a wide range of various uses. They ranged from being able to unleash powerful sword blasts to being able to heal his injuries if he was given enough time to concentrate. In a nutshell, all of Zack's magical abilities and special abilities were designed to give Zack a series of options that Zack could take advantage of in just about any combat scenario, and although Zack was clearly not one of the most powerful users of these abilities for his time, he was more than formidable to challenge any opponent regardless of skill level. Both of these guys carry a great deal of magical and special abilities, however the main difference between these two is how their abilities empower their own combat potential and what abilities make up for their own combat weaknesses. Due to Zack's main focus of wanting to best his opponents through simple blade work, I have to believe that although Zack knows a lot of powerful tricks and techniques, he would only use them if he felt it was necessary, and although in terms of overall combat devastation, Zack completely outclasses Titus in every way, Titus' magical abilities enhance the one combat quality he is best known for: his speed. Titus would use his own abilities to speed up his own attacks while having a good chance of slowing down his opponent's movements or even decreasing his own opponent's combat performance, and although his most keen magical skill does contain a prime weakness which I will discuss later on in this video, all of his abilities would place Titus in a much better position and would make him a much harder target to hit. What's the point of Zack having all these overwhelming blast attacks if he can't hit his opponent because he's moving so fast? Zack himself has no counters to any of Titus' magical assaults, and although I'm willing to admit that in terms of Titus' overdrive against Zack's range of limit breakers, Zack would clearly have the advantage, but as a complete package, Titus' magical abilities give him a higher rate of making his techniques count. I give Titus the magical edge. Titus wields a unique sword named the Brotherhood, which was given to him by Wakka as a gift, which was originally meant for Wakka's brother Chappu. The weapon itself was very light, allowing Titus to handle it easily while being able to put his use of speed attacks to good use, and had an overall blade length of about 4 feet. The weapon itself had a number of special qualities that gave it a number of technical properties. The sword had the ability to give the user a 15% increase in strength, and although this helps add to Titus' lack of physical arm strength, it was not able to pierce through tough opponents. The weapon also carried a unique ability called Water Strike, which allowed the weapon to have a serious effect against opponents that were vulnerable against water. However, one issue that I myself have with this weapon is the material that the blade itself is made of. Since the blade is not made of any sort of material designed for cutting, I really question on whether or not this sword is meant for cutting or simply hitting things. It would be the same kind of factor if Titus was using a weapon made out of wood. It may be good for speed, but the weapon itself is not very lethal. Zack wields the Buster Sword, and it has been classified as an enormous broadsword. From the tip to the handle, it is approximately 5 to 6 feet long with a single-edged large blade approximately 1 foot wide. There are 2 holes near the handguard which have been theorized to be materia slots, or simply the main clips that Zack uses to wield the sword on his back. Due to the sword's overall design, this weapon was quite heavy and designed for power strikes. However, a user of this weapon could use the Buster Sword as a speed weapon if they could enhance their own physical performance. The sword itself also contained a unique ability to fire off an energy wave at an opponent. However, these waves could be easily blocked by a well-timed deflection. Between these two weapons, they both seem to have a lot of opposing factors. Titus' Brotherhood is a much smaller sword, but is lighter and designed for speed. However, it cannot power through tough objects, and it is my belief that due to its lightweight build, it cannot take power strikes very well. However, Zack's Buster Sword is a much bigger and heavier weapon designed for power, and it is made from a much tougher material than Titus' Brotherhood sword is made from. So, to compare them against each other, Titus can move his sword faster than Zack's Buster Sword could counter. However, Zack has proven that although he has trouble with speed attacks, due to the Brotherhood's lightweight build, I don't believe Titus would be able to stagger Zack's Buster Sword like Sephiroth could. And although Zack's sword is a much harder sword to handle, due to its heavy make, I do believe that as Zack manages to hit the Brotherhood sword with enough force, he could end up disarming or even breaking the weapon itself. I give the edge to Zack's Buster Sword in terms of weapons. Just like in my Sephiroth vs. Cypher matchup, I will be using Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms in order to describe what Titus and Zack's fighting maneuvers will be. That being said, Titus, with his lack of any real swordsman training, would most likely classify him as a Form 1 Seicho user with a mixture of Form 4 Ataru thanks to his reliability on speed attacks and jumping maneuvers. Now, also due to a lack of any solid sources on Titus' combat skills, what follows next are my own personal theories based off of everything I've seen from Final Fantasy X. Titus himself doesn't seem to have any sort of battle plan at all due to his lack of experience in one-on-one combat, which leads me to believe that Titus would most likely approach a fight like this relying on his speed and athletic ability to jump around and just make things up as he goes. Titus would also rely heavily on his ability to enhance his own body's movements to make up for his lack of combat experience. However, one serious prime weakness of this tactic is that it is my belief that when one uses a magical ability like haste to enhance their body's performance, it in essence ends up burning through their stamina a lot faster. And although as a Blitzball player he does have a great deal of stamina, he would be limited to how much time he would have to keep this technique up to combat peak efficiency, which means that the moment he decides to use that magical ability, he's really giving himself a time before he completely drains himself of energy. With Zack's reputation of being more than willing to go head-to-head with his opponents, this would most likely classify him as being a Form 5 Xian or the Gem So user. Within all his engagements, whether he was fighting against his mentor Angel, trying to subdue a mat-driven Sephiroth, or fight off an entire Shinra army, Zack was a very straightforward combatant, and due to his years of training, Zack was more than capable of engaging any opponent regardless of their skill level. However, due to his lack of tactical foresight, this left Zack very unprepared against opponents who could easily overpower him, and due to his ability to go head-to-head, this meant that he left himself very open because he was so willing to want to take down his opponents going head-to-head instead of actually planning out his moves. Despite this, Zack was still a very capable sword user and would resort to using his magical and special abilities if the opportunity presented itself, but by far, Zack's greatest achievement in combat was his battle against Sephiroth. Although he ultimately lost his engagement, the fact that he was able to fight off Sephiroth for a good period of time gives Zack a lot of great combat credibility. And even before his fall from grace, Sephiroth himself had acknowledged that Zack's skill as a member of Soldier had exceeded that of his mentor Angel's, and Angel's skill at the time was at least on par with Sephiroth's, and that is saying something. The problem that I have when comparing Titus's and Zack's battle tactics is that both of their approaches provide a great deal of problems. On Titus's side, because he's never been in a sword fight like this in his life, he would be forced to resort to using his magical abilities to speed himself up, but by doing this he would be giving himself a timer before he completely runs out of stamina. And due to his more than likely tactic of making things up as he goes, it would put him in a much better position to take control of the fight, but he wouldn't be able to take advantage of this because due to his lack of any tactical battle planning, he wouldn't know what to do. He wouldn't be able to take the initiative. While Zack's straightforward method would mean that he would follow Titus wherever he goes in this fight, Zack would simply struggle just to try to keep up with Titus while leaving himself open to counterattacks. So to sum things up, we have an amateur whose tactics would give him a certain amount of time to take advantage of the situation, but he wouldn't make this count, and you have a trained soldier whose methods work against him. And for these reasons, no edge will be given in terms of battle tactics. And now the verdict. This match is actually pretty close to call, however, the prime question that one needs to ask to determine a victor is this. Can Zack Fair take enough damage long enough for Titus to run out of stamina? And really, when you look at all the variables, I would say yes. Two examples to help support this claims is Zack's fight against the Shinra army and Cloud Strife's final battle against Sephiroth. In his engagement against the Shinra army, Zack fought off wave after wave of Shinra infantrymen while being riddled with bullets and being hit with grenades. And it was only after Zack had taken serious damage for a good amount of time and being shot in the head numerous times that Zack finally went down. And in the battle between Cloud Strife and Sephiroth, once Sephiroth had taken advantage of Cloud's attack and impaled him on his sword, Sephiroth threw Cloud into the air and continued to pierce his body with dozens of strikes. And by this time, Cloud was at about the same age Zack was when he died, which means it's a fair statement to make that Zack too could probably survive such an assault, since both Cloud and Zack were injected with Genova cells and this enhanced all of their physical capabilities. Titus, on the other hand, has great speed and maneuverability on his side, but those are his only real advantages. Titus would not stand a chance going head-to-head against Zack in his standard speed, and would be forced to enhance his body's movements performance in order to allow himself to take control of the fight. Once he has done this, however, I do not believe that he would have a great sense of forward planning and would just begin making things up as he goes, which, on the other hand, would give him the advantage of being very unpredictable. Once he's in control of the fight, he could lead Zack wherever he wants, and for someone like Titus, these wouldn't amount to anything more but simply glorified stall tactics. Although being as unpredictable as Titus would be in his enhanced speed means that Titus would not have any problems getting around Zack's Buster Sword, and he would definitely get a great series of hits on Zack, both with his Brotherhood Sword and physical strikes. However, none of these techniques would be devastating or lethal maneuvers, and after a period of time, Titus would be completely exhausted, while Zack would then be in most likely resort to his enhanced healing powers to recover himself, and even if he chose not to use his healing powers, he would be in a much better position and much better shape to continue on the fight, leaving Titus open to a fatal strike from Zack's Buster Sword. And before any of you guys make the claim that Titus could simply use his magic to slow down Zack's movement, then speed himself up, I'm willing to acknowledge that this technique would work, but Zack, as a trained member of Soldier, may have left openings within his fighting maneuvers up close, but at a distance, Zack too is pretty quick on his feet, which means that the odds of Titus actually hitting Zack with his magical abilities to slow him down are pretty low. To give you guys a visual guide of how this fight would play out, it would be a mixture of the majority of Yoda's duel with Count Dooku in Star Wars Attack of the Clones, and the first duel between Anakin Skywalker and Asajj Ventress from the animated Clone Wars series. The two would engage in a long game of cat and mouse, with Titus running and jumping from location to location while Zack gives chase. Then once Titus gets tired of running and chooses to go on the offense, he would begin running and jumping circles around Zack while delivering a great series of both sword and physical strikes. If Zack manages to retaliate with one of his special or magical abilities, Titus would have no problem dodging the move, and although Titus would be moving his body at a much faster rate than Zack's, Zack would be nimble enough to at least dodge Titus' magical retaliations. Both would be reluctant to try to use their special attacks, but they would do nothing more but cancel each other out. However, once Titus runs out of stamina, Zack, even after taking serious damage over a long course of the battle, would be in a much better condition than Titus, and would simply just hammer down on Titus' exhausted body until he goes down. Bottom line, Titus cannot compete with Zack due to his lack of experience in tactical battle planning in one-on-one combat. I'm willing to give Titus some serious credit by stating that Titus has all the skills he would need to take down Zack, but his lack of experience and knowledge of the best way to use his skills properly in a contest like this and the functions of his own weapon prevent him from being able to win. Now, to be honest, if Titus was facing Zack before Professor Hojo injected Zack and Cloud with the Genova cells, then there is no doubt in my mind that Titus' overwhelming array of attacks would overwhelm Zack and defeat him. But as it has been shown numerous times that the inclusion of these Genova cells has been such a critical element in making all those who have these cells superhumans, capable of achieving higher combat performances than that of any normal human character. And while Zack may not be the best sword user of his era, he has the skills necessary in both physical terms and swordsmanship to survive. I declare Zack Fair the victor. Remember guys, this outcome was my own personal opinion, so don't feel too bad if Titus is one of your favorite Final Fantasy main characters. And please feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to keep track of me and my future Versus Series matchups and future videos. And like always, here's a small preview of my next Versus Series matchup.
I've come to retrieve my power. You can't handle it.
Is that all you got? I think it's time to put you out of your misery.